back to Reliable Sources. I'm Brian Stelter. President Trump's response to a federal judge blocking his travel ban order was to call it outrageous, ridiculous, and to call the George W. Bush appointee a so-called judge. Evan McMillin says this language is a threat to the republic. McMillin is a former CIA operative who mounted a long-shot independent bid for president last year. Now, McMillin is emerging as a media darling, a favorite of cable news bookers. Maybe because he's going further than most Republicans are, calling out Trump, even saying the president is an authoritarian. McMillin is now the co-founder of a group called Stand Up Republic, and he joins me now from Washington. Evan, good to see you today.
Good to see you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
You're saying Trump is an authoritarian. It's time for everyone to accept that. How so? Defend that claim.
Well, authoritarians routinely attack checks on their power and sources of information that threaten to hold them accountable. Donald Trump does exactly that. He scapegoats different races and religious groups for the challenges that some people in our country are facing, the real challenges. So there are a number of signs that he is. But with regard to this executive order, he's attacking the judge or the judicial branch that is restraining his policy. That is a problem, because we depend in our country on the separation of powers between three co-equal branches of government that check each other and make sure our rights are protected. And so when you have one branch trying to undermine the legitimacy of another, that's a big problem.
He's not sending his thugs to the federal courthouse, though.
Well, no, he's not, but it doesn't take that. We'll see where this goes. To suggest that another branch is illegitimate or a so-called judge, and it's not just anyone saying this. This is the President of the United States of America. Now, this is perhaps a small thing, but this is where it begins. And actually, Donald Trump has a history of attacking the judicial branch and suggesting that he doesn't support or agree with its independence. And that's a problem, and that's something that we all need to watch very carefully and oppose.
I was looking to see if the president has tweeted this morning. So far, he hasn't. You know, every day this week he's woken up, he's weighed in on Twitter, in some cases about this judge this weekend. So far, nothing from the president. I'm curious to dig down deeper on this issue of authoritarianism. It's on the cover of the Atlantic, the issue coming out this week. It's starting to be talked about on television and in print. Do you think the press is coming late to this issue, this concern?
No, I don't think they're necessarily coming late. I wish there would have been more coverage of his authoritarian-like tendencies during the election. But even I tried to hold back in calling him an authoritarian until he was actually elected and started governing like an authoritarian. But that is unfortunately what I've seen in the past 2 weeks. Now it's time to acknowledge that, and the Atlantic has published a piece, at least online, by David Frum that I recommend all Americans read. It's an extremely important piece that talks about this very issue, and we need to educate ourselves here in America about what this actually looks like and what it means for our basic rights and for our system of government.
Certainly some of the things Trump has said about the press, calling the press fake news, it is troubling. But Michael Wolff, who was here a few minutes ago, would say you're being hysterical. How do you try to persuade people that this is a real issue?
Well, I know it's difficult for a lot of people who haven't lived under authoritarian regimes to identify them when they emerge. This is part of the challenge that all countries face when an authoritarian pursues power and takes power. But I've had the benefit, I suppose, in this case, of living under authoritarian regimes overseas during my time with the CIA, and I know what this looks like. I see it coming from a mile away, except that now it's happening in my own country. And I'm deeply concerned about it, and I'm doing what I think is important for us, for our system of government, and for the protection of our basic rights. We need to make sure that our president respects our system of government, will respect the powers that are vested by the Constitution in the legislative branch and in the judiciary, and that's just not something we can compromise on.
Evan, thank you for being here. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
This is the journalistic story of a lifetime. I've heard that